11a 練習問題。逐次通訳とメモ。英日通訳。このレッスンではメモを取りながら英語で話された話の内容を把握し、段落ごとに日本語に通訳する練習を行います。読み上げられた段落と次に読み上げられる段落の間にはチャイム音の合図が入り、通訳するための空白時間があります。この間に 10b の要領で通訳をしてください。メモの準備はできましたか？それでは始めます。練習1。
In the early 1980s, the average citizen of Japan will have a higher income than the average American. At present, the per capita GNP of Japan is a little more than 3,000 against 5,500 in the U.S. If Japan can maintain its present growth rate of 8 to 10%, it is a question of only a very few years. Since European countries have been growing faster than the U.S., we may well find ourselves further down the income scale by the time we are overtaken by Japan. But only Japan seems to have a momentum destined to rise clearly above the rest in a longer run. Thus, shortly after passing the U.S., if not at the very moment, the Japanese may find themselves the richest people in the world, except possibly for some small oil-producing countries. How is Japan doing it? Among several factors, surely, are the Japanese people's habit of saving and investing a high proportion of their income, and their remarkable human qualities. Economically speaking, The Japanese have every right to consider themselves the most successful people in the world. Particularly striking is the way in which Japan has ignored the precepts of Western economics and finance. The U.S. believes in free, unrestricted competition. Japan, without ignoring competition, believes in cooperation. The U.S. believes in free markets. Japan believes in keeping things under control.
練習2。
Japanese people who have traveled abroad are very few. But significantly, they come back very different from what they were when they left Japan. For the first thing, I think, one learns from traveling is to appreciate more one's country. I have never loved so much my country since I left it. When I am in Paris, I notice only the bad aspects of it. The difficulty to find parking for my car. The same ugly face I see every day. Little things, little troubles. From far, all this disappears, and only what makes Paris unique remains. So many colors, so many races, opinions, complete freedom, the beauty of girls and their taste, their spirit and humor, so many details, and fundamental things that only centuries of desire, hate, faith, suffering, love, and revolt could bring together. It was one of the reasons why young French people are so little interested in the United States. Unfortunately, young Japanese people identify too much all foreigners with Americans. For them, all foreigners are Americans, the same as long ago They were all from Holland. But all countries make the same kind of mistakes. As for Europeans, all yellow faces are Chinese. It is why I strongly advise young Japanese people to study more old Europe. It is an adult continent that can teach them a lot. I myself learn every day something from Japan and Japanese people. In England, I learned to hide what I knew. I will always remember a party in London I was invited to. All evening, with the enthusiasm of youth, I talked about the differences that made French television superior to English television, to a man who listened to me respectfully as if he did not know anything about it. And the day after I learned he was one of the pioneers of TV in Great Britain. That is the English humor I learned. In Japan, I learned the Japanese laugh. In France, when I break a precious statue I like very much, I shout bad words. In Japan, now, I just laugh. I laugh now to people I cannot talk to because of the language, just to show them I like them. I laugh both when I am happy and when I have trouble.
練習3。
I have always been fascinated by maps, especially by those which add to simple expanses of land and sea such features as elevation, rainfall, temperature, population density, races, languages, natural resources, and the like. One can learn a great deal from such maps, and I personally often find them more interesting and instructive than books. But maps can also be very misleading. The standard ones, taught in schools and hung on walls everywhere, ingrain in our minds a picture of the world based purely on simple space relationships. In such maps, the oceans loom largest, and the land masses are dominated by the great open spaces of Siberia, Canada, and Greenland, or by the almost empty deserts and steppe lands of Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, and Australia. A 100 square miles of the Sahara or Greenland show up as big as 100 square miles of the industrialized Ruhr or the rich farmlands of Japan. Countries like Brazil and Peru, or China and India, are shown as close neighbors, whereas in reality they are separated from each other by mountains or jungles, through which little or no trade passes. On the other hand, countries like Japan and the United States, or Canada and England, which have close and extensive relations of all sorts, appear to be cut off from each other by an endless expanse of ocean. This world of simple space relationships, of course, has its own validity. In ancient times, before man had mastered the seas, it came close to being the real world. Even today, it is to a large extent the world as a ship's captain or an airplane pilot must see it. But it is far from being the world we actually live in. This real world is shaped not so much by land and sea areas as by man himself and what he can produce. Beyond this, man has in recent years virtually eliminated the significance of distance. Water, far from separating countries, brings them close together. A barrel of oil can be brought thousands of miles from the Persian Gulf to Japan far more cheaply than it can be moved a few tens of miles in Tibet or Ethiopia. A resident of the capital of Venezuela can reach Tokyo or London more rapidly than he can much of the southern part of his own country.
練習4。
We do not have fully accurate statistics on the populations of all the countries of the world. No one knows for sure the population of China, or of some of the African and South Asian lands. The errors in our estimates, however, are probably no more than 10% or 20% at the very most. This map puts into startling perspective the well-known fact that more than half the people of the world live in East and South Asia. The two great population giants of China and India take on their true aspect. The middle-sized giants of Indonesia, Pakistan, and Japan loom very large, and even the so-called little countries of Southeast Asia, Korea, the Philippines, look surprisingly big when compared with other parts of the world. The next most startling revelation of this map is the largeness of Europe, which clearly comes next to East and Southeast Asia in size. By contrast, the great Arctic areas of Siberia and Canada shrivel down to their southern fringes, where their populations are actually concentrated. And Australia becomes a small island out beyond Indonesia. the whole of the New World, of the Western Hemisphere, shrinks greatly as compared to the Old World of the Eastern Hemisphere, though the United States, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean countries hold their own much better than the South America, let alone Canada. The Middle East, with its large desert areas, also shrinks somewhat, and Africa, which in geographic area is 3 times the size of Europe, ends up about half its size. Of all the possible maps of the world, that by population is probably the most significant. But it too has its serious distortions. It shows a world dominated by China and India, whereas we all know that if there are 2 dominant powers in the world today, they are the United States and the Soviet Union, which, however, show up on this map in rather modest proportions.